There are 9 weeks until the Iowa caucuses, and 16 presidential candidates still remain in the Democratic field. Montana Governor Steve Bullock and former Pennsylvania Congressman Joe Sestak dropped out of the race over the holiday weekend, while other candidates hit the campaign trail in Iowa, including former Vice President Joe Biden, who kicked off an 8-day No Malarkey bus tour that will cover 18 counties ahead of the Iowa caucuses. CBS News campaign reporter Bo Erickson has been following Biden's bus tour and joins us now from Algona, Iowa. Bo, thanks for being with us. So what is Biden hoping to get out of this bus tour?
Well, that's exactly right. We are on day 3 of 8 days throughout from western Iowa all the way to eastern Iowa. And the point here is to try to connect with rural America. They think by doing this tour through 18 different counties that they can pick up undecided Democrats. They are encouraged by a poll that says 65% of Democrats here in Iowa are still undecided. And they're also trying to pick up dissatisfied or people who are not happy with President Trump, some of the Republicans that I've already met some of them throughout. What they're not trying to do is really bring up large numbers at their events here. In the city that we're in right now, there's about 5,000 people here, but in the caucus last year in 2016, there were only about 1,000 votes altogether. But they find it still important because Joe Biden thinks that campaigns and President Trump forget about rural issues, and so he's trying to bring them on to their tent.
And so in his speeches, has Biden taken a more general election posture, or is he seeking to draw differences with some of his own primary rivals there, Bo?
The target is all President Trump here. He is trying to draw direct contrast between himself, the former vice president. People really like him. They can kind of picture him in the Oval Office versus President Trump. He went after President Trump today and said that he thinks NATO is a protection racket, and he's kind of using it as one. And he's really trying to hit President Trump on foreign policy here as well. That is one area that he is drawing contrast with his Democratic rivals, though. It is his foreign policy experience. And some people in different parts of the country may be surprised or interested to hear that foreign policy is a huge issue here in rural Iowa because of agriculture and how the markets are going right now. And a lot of Democrats showing up at Joe Biden events are not happy with the tariff war that President Trump has started, and they are hoping some relief if they can get Joe Biden into the Oval Office.
All right, Bo Erickson reporting from the Biden bus tour in Iowa. Thank you so much. And for more on the 2020 race, I want to bring in Stephen Gruber-Miller and Caitlin Huey-Burns. Stephen is the statehouse reporter for the Des Moines Register, and Caitlin is our CBSN political reporter. Welcome to both of you. So Biden is ahead in the polls nationally. He was asked why that wasn't translating in Iowa. Here's what he had to say. Let's listen.
I think it is translating. I think that's what we're here. We're here to translate. We're here to translate the polls nationally to here. It's the first primary. It's the first caucus, and it's it kicks off the whole democratic process, and it's very, very important. And I've told you from the beginning. I know you kind of doubted a little bit, but I'm running to win. I'm not running to lose.
So, Stephen, what is Biden up against in Iowa?
Sure, yeah. He has several rivals who have increased their support in recent polls, including Pete Buttigieg, who we found in the Register's most recent Iowa poll was in first with 25%, compared to Biden about 10 points back. So he's got rivals with more enthusiasm than him, and his argument, his campaign's argument, is that the people who support him are the most likely to come out on caucus night, and so that's what this sort of rural bus tour is about, is getting to those people and finding the reliable caucus goers who might not be as flashy. Their supporters might not be as loud, but they think that those are the people who are going to come out for them.
And speaking of his rivals, according to a Monmouth University poll, Pete Buttigieg is in the lead in Iowa. And in a new ad, Buttigieg takes on Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's plans for higher education. Let's listen to his ad.
I believe we should move to make college affordable for everybody. There are some voices saying, well, that doesn't count unless you go even further, unless it's free even for the kids of millionaires. But I only want to make promises that we can keep.
So, Caitlin, he's not really taking on Biden directly there. He's more focused on Sanders and Warren. Is his message playing there with the Iowa voter?
Well, it seems to be, because he's been consistently on the rise in Iowa in our polling and in other polling out today. What's really interesting, with 9 weeks to go till the Iowa caucuses, we're really seeing this battle that Democrats are waging between kind of the head and the heart. That's a conventional battle that goes through these primaries. But right now, you're seeing in the rise of Pete Buttigieg at least some appetite for that. It's really interesting to see from our CBS News Battleground Tracker poll that Elizabeth Warren has been slipping a bit. And while she's seen as someone who's the more energetic candidate, you're seeing that many voters, at least in that poll and others, are showing that some of her policies are deemed a little too risky. And when we're thinking about this primary and this caucus, Democratic voters are trying to assess who is best to equip to defeat Donald Trump. And that's kind of how this race is shaking out. So Pete Buttigieg has certainly made the calculation that there's not only room to grow kind of in a more moderate lane, but he believes that that's kind of what people have an appetite for.
Right.
Candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders believe that energizing the base around big and bold ideas, as they call them, is the way to win. That's also why you see Buttigieg and some other more moderate candidates saying, look, these ideas are bold too, but they also have to have a dose of practicality, really.
And how do you think the landscape is going to shake out after the Iowa caucuses? I mean, do you think some of the second-tier candidates will drop out, or will they say, look, I'm not focused on Iowa, that wasn't part of my strategy?
It's really hard to get through this primary process without focusing on Iowa. We've seen candidates like Kamala Harris really double down on the state. And when you look at the past 10 elections, only 3 eventual nominees did so without winning Iowa. So it's a very critical state. There have been a lot of grievances from some candidates and Democrats saying that it's not representative of the entire process and the entire Democratic electorate. And that's why you see a lot of focus on places like South Carolina and Nevada, which are a little more diverse. But this is kind of where a lot of campaigns are staking their claim. So if you're not able to make it out of Iowa, at least in the top 3 or 4, it's really difficult to make a case for continuing on.
Very, very interesting. There'll be a lot of people right on the edge there, right? Okay, so Senator Kamala Harris, as you mentioned, spent Thanksgiving in Iowa. She was focusing on other early voting states, but now she's putting all her energy into Iowa. Stephen, what is the Harris campaign doing in Iowa to try and stay relevant?
Right. They're trying to capitalize on the holiday weekend when they might not have as much competition among other candidates, and use that time to get her in front of people. She went to a turkey trot. She cooked dinner, trying to just really emphasize that she's here. She joked earlier this year that she's moving to Iowa, and she's trying to make good on that and kind of have a surge. Iowans make up their minds late, and so the hope is that she gets in front of people and can make that case as they're making up their minds.
All right, so Montana Governor Steve Bullock and former Congressman Joe Sestak dropped out of the race this weekend. Caitlin, what does that mean for the Democratic landscape? It doesn't seem to mean much. I mean, they weren't making a lot of headway, right?
Well, I think it shows us a couple of different things. First, as we've talked about before, the debates are having an outsized influence on shaping this field. If you're not able to make the debate, it's really difficult to make your case. I think Steve Bullock saw that. I think it also shows that it's a really difficult election year for governors. Steve Bullock has a lot to his name. He has a lot of credentials that maybe in any other election year may make him a real, top tier candidate, but he got in late, which also kind of stunted any momentum or, presented some difficulties in laying the groundwork and building an organization. And we've seen that it's really difficult to translate a governorship to the national stage in what has been really a nationalized election. And I think Steve Bullock had recognized that. He had really kind of camped out in Iowa, trying to meet voters one-on-one, try to make his case that way, but it had proved very difficult. He also tried to be the more moderate force in this race, going after his rivals who are of the more progressive lane, but there are already candidates who are trying to do that as well. So hard to make a case.
As the field shrinks and crystallizes.
Yep. Only 17, I think.
That's right, only 17 to go. All right. Stephen Gruber-Miller and Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks to both of you.